Picture this. Nearly 40 million Americans living in poverty right now, struggling to afford basic necessities, trapped in communities that time and opportunity seem to have forgotten. But what happens when entire towns become ground zero for economic devastation? When the American dream doesn't just fade but completely vanishes? Today, we're diving deep into the darkest corners of American prosperity, exposing 10 towns where poverty isn't just a statistic. It's a way of life that's crushing entire communities. Before we begin, I want you to understand something crucial. These aren't just numbers on a chart or pins on a map. These are real places where real families wake up every single day wondering how they'll survive. Places where children go to bed hungry, where parents work multiple jobs and still can't make ends meet, and where the infrastructure is crumbling faster than anyone can repair it. So, buckle up, because what you're about to discover might completely change how you view poverty in America. Let's start our journey in East St. Louis, Illinois, a town that's become synonymous with urban decay and economic collapse. With a poverty rate hovering around 43%, nearly half of this town's 18,000 residents are living below the federal poverty line. But here's the shocking part. This used to be a thriving industrial hub. East St. Louis was once home to major meatpacking plants, factories, and a bustling economy. Now, entire neighborhoods sit abandoned, with boarded-up buildings stretching for blocks. The median household income struggles to reach just $21,000 a year, less than half the national average. Walking through certain areas, you'll see houses that haven't been maintained in decades, streets filled with potholes that could swallow a tire, and a sense of abandonment that's almost palpable. The unemployment rate regularly exceeds 15%, meaning that finding work isn't just difficult, it's nearly impossible for many residents. Now, let's head south to Chula, Mississippi, where the situation becomes even more dire. This small delta town of about 2,000 people faces a staggering poverty rate of nearly 54%. Yes, you heard that right. More than half of everyone living in Chula exists below the poverty line. The median household income sits at a mere $15,000 annually. Think about that for a moment. That's barely over $1,200 a month to cover rent, food, utilities, healthcare, and everything else a family needs to survive. In Chula, nearly 40% of homes lack complete plumbing facilities, and many residents still don't have reliable access to clean running water in 2025. The town's infrastructure is so degraded that some roads are barely passable, and the few businesses that remain struggle to stay afloat in an economy where most people simply don't have money to spend. And it gets worse. Travel to Centerville, Illinois, just minutes from East St. Louis, and you'll find a poverty rate exceeding 47%. This tiny community of about 5,000 residents has seen its economic foundation completely eroded. The median household income barely touches $19,000, and unemployment rates consistently rank among the highest in the entire state. What makes Centerville particularly heartbreaking is that it's essentially trapped in a cycle it cannot escape. With such high poverty, the tax base is virtually non-existent. Without tax revenue, the town cannot improve its infrastructure, schools, or public services. Without these improvements, businesses won't invest, and residents who can leave usually do, taking whatever economic potential remained with them. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. Head to Pine Ridge in South Dakota, technically an Indian reservation, but functioning as a town for many residents, and you'll encounter poverty that rivals developing nations. The poverty rate here exceeds 53%, but the real numbers tell an even grimmer story. The unemployment rate on the reservation fluctuates between 80 and 90%, depending on the season. The average life expectancy for men is just 48 years, one of the lowest in the entire Western Hemisphere. Let that sink in. People living in Pine Ridge have a life expectancy comparable to citizens of some war-torn nations. The median household income hovers around $4,000 annually. $4,000. That's what some Americans spend on a single vacation. The reservation struggles with inadequate housing, with many families living in structures without electricity, running water, or proper heating. Winter temperatures can plummet to 40 below zero, and families huddle together burning whatever they can find for warmth. Now, let's shift our focus to Kentucky, specifically Beattyville, a small Appalachian town that's become a symbol of rural American poverty. With a poverty rate of approximately 44%, and a median household income of just under $13,000, Beattyville represents the forgotten communities of coal country. The coal industry's collapse didn't just cost jobs, it obliterated an entire way of life. Walk through Beattyville today, and you'll see the remnants of what once was. Closed storefronts, deteriorating homes, and residents who've given up hope of things ever improving. The town has virtually no major employers, and many residents survive on disability payments or government assistance. Healthcare access is severely limited, with the nearest hospital over 30 miles away on winding mountain roads. For someone without reliable transportation, a medical emergency can quickly become life-threatening. Moving west, we encounter Fresno County's Mendota, California, an agricultural town with the dubious distinction of having one of California's highest poverty rates at nearly 50%. Here's what makes Mendota particularly cruel. It's surrounded by some of America's most productive farmland, yet the people who work these fields cannot afford to buy the food they harvest. The median household income sits at just $23,000, and seasonal agricultural work means many families have zero income for months at a time. Child poverty rates exceed 65%, meaning that more than 2 out of every 3 children in Mendota are growing up in poverty. The town struggles with substandard housing, where multiple families often crowd into single-family homes because rent, even in this impoverished area, consumes the majority of their income. Access to quality education is severely limited, perpetuating a cycle where children from poor families have little chance of escaping poverty themselves. But number one will blow your mind. Let's talk about Camden, New Jersey, a city that's become America's poster child for urban collapse and concentrated poverty. Camden's poverty rate consistently hovers around 40%. But what makes it truly shocking is the scale. This isn't a rural community of a few thousand people. This is a city of about 74,000 residents, meaning nearly 30,000 people are living in deep poverty. The median household income barely reaches $28,000, less than half of New Jersey's state average. Camden has repeatedly ranked as one of America's most dangerous cities, with violent crime rates that are 6 times the national average. Why does this matter? Because poverty and crime create a vicious cycle that's nearly impossible to break. Businesses won't invest in areas with high crime, meaning no jobs. No jobs means continued poverty and desperation, which fuels more crime. The city's infrastructure is crumbling, with abandoned buildings numbering in the thousands. Schools are underfunded and struggling, with graduation rates well below state averages. Healthcare access is limited despite the presence of a major hospital, because many residents lack insurance or transportation to receive care. Now, let's head to Marks, Mississippi, the poorest town in America's poorest state. With a poverty rate exceeding 58% and a median household income of just $13,000, Marks represents the absolute bottom of American economic prosperity. This delta town of about 1,500 residents has an unemployment rate that regularly exceeds 30%. More than 40% of homes are valued at less than $50,000, and many are in such poor condition they're barely habitable. Marks struggles with food insecurity, lack of access to health care, and an education system that's severely underfunded. The town has virtually no economic development, no major employers, and no clear path forward. Young people who manage to graduate high school almost always leave, seeking opportunities anywhere else, leaving behind an aging population with fewer and fewer resources to support themselves. Highland Park, Michigan presents yet another variation of American poverty. This small enclave city, surrounded by Detroit, has a poverty rate of approximately 42%, with a median household income of just $16,000. What makes Highland Park's situation particularly tragic is that it was once home to Ford's Model T plant and was a beacon of American industrial might. Today, the city is financially insolvent, having lost its ability to provide even basic services to residents. Streetlights were repossessed years ago, leaving entire neighborhoods in darkness at night. The city has no functioning police department of its own, relying on county sheriffs for emergency response. Fire protection is minimal, and response times can be dangerously long. Residents describe feeling abandoned by government at every level, trapped in a place where the social contract between citizens and the state has completely broken down. Finally, let's examine Williamsburg, Kentucky, another Appalachian community, devastated by economic collapse. With a poverty rate around 41% and a median household income of approximately $19,000, Williamsburg exemplifies how the decline of traditional industries can destroy entire communities. The collapse of coal mining and manufacturing left this town of about 5,000 residents with virtually no economic base. Unemployment remains stubbornly high, and many residents survive on Social Security disability payments. The town struggles with a growing drug crisis, as opioid addiction has ravaged communities across Appalachia. Healthcare infrastructure is inadequate, and many residents go without necessary medical treatment simply because they cannot afford it or cannot access it. The town's young people face a stark choice: stay in a place with no opportunity, or leave behind their families and communities for uncertain prospects elsewhere. So what connects all these communities? Why have they fallen so far while other areas prosper? The answer is complex, but several themes emerge. First, economic shifts left these towns behind. Whether it's the collapse of manufacturing, the decline of coal mining, or the mechanization of agriculture, these communities were built around industries that no longer exist or no longer employed large numbers of workers. Second, geographic isolation compounds the problem. Many of these towns are far from major economic centers, making it difficult for residents to access job opportunities elsewhere. Third, inadequate infrastructure creates barriers to development. Without good roads, reliable utilities, and modern communications infrastructure, businesses have no incentive to invest. Fourth, underfunded schools perpetuate cycles of poverty by failing to prepare children for success in a modern economy. But perhaps most importantly, these communities suffer from a loss of hope. When generation after generation sees no way forward, when every attempt at improvement fails, when the most talented and ambitious young people flee as soon as they're able, what remains is a sense of abandonment and despair that's almost impossible to overcome. The psychological toll of concentrated, persistent poverty cannot be overstated. It affects everything from health outcomes to family stability to civic engagement. These 10 towns represent just a fraction of the communities across America grappling with extreme poverty and poor living conditions. Behind every statistic we've shared today is a human story of struggle, resilience, and too often, defeat. The question we must ask ourselves is this: in the wealthiest nation in human history, is this acceptable? Should entire communities be left behind while others prosper? And most importantly, what are we willing to do about it? If this video opened your eyes to a reality many Americans never see, hit that like button, subscribe to American Columbus for more eye-opening content, and share this video with someone who needs to understand what's really happening in forgotten America. Because until we acknowledge the problem, we can never begin to solve it.